I drop bombs on them, this is hip hop for justice.
People that we're supposed to trust
racism and miscarriage of justice.
Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black teenager.
Sandra Bland.
Death has provoked weeks of demonstrations.
2 years old, died later in hospital.
1.
The December 2nd shooting of Mario Woods by 5 officers.
The 2014 death of Michael Brown.
The 32-year-old Philando Castile.
We must win in the name of justice. In the name of justice for Mario Woods. In the name of justice for all others who've been brutalized by police.
People who are ready and willing to fight for justice.
Hip-hop artists are our leaders today.
You're more than just a rapper. You are a teacher, you are an artist, and you are a leader.
Your voices, your words, your rhythms have attracted young people in all of the countries of the earth that allow your music and your lyrics to be played.
Peace, family. It's Brother Miles. Welcome to our weekly nationwide conference call, this live podcast, Hip Hop for Justice, where art meets activism. It's always an honor to be on this line with my big brother and partner, my co-host, S1W James Baum of the legendary Public Enemy. And of course, we can't go nowhere without the queen of Hip Hop for Justice, our sister Half Pint of the legendary Son of Berserk, featuring No Self-Control. Peace, y'all.
Peace, my brother. How are you?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there. It's Sunday, and once again, I am ready to put in this work and keep it moving forward.
Big brother James, I do want to just send you a special shout out and acknowledge that your stepfather passed, and you are with your mother and family, and of course all of us want to extend our love and condolences to your mother and to the family, and of course to you. We pray that everything is as well as can be expected during a difficult time, and of course it's our prayer that the God will bless your mother and the family with his tranquility and cover everyone with his spirit while you all work to, continue moving forward and continue building on the legacy of that great man. So our love and condolences to you and the family.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I will definitely let her know. She's doing better today since we finished up everything yesterday. So everything is good. Today she went to church, and me and my brother went to hang out with her for a few. And, she needed help with some things. So we just went over there and took care of that. So I'm leaving tomorrow. I should be back in the D.C. metropolitan area about 3:30.
Yes, sir. Well, being there, as we're taught as Muslims, that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that heaven lies at the foot of mother. And
that's right.
Anything that we can do as children, if we're blessed with our parents, of course, being there for them in their time of need as they were there for us during our times of need is a no-brainer. And, particularly mother. I remember hearing, I know you heard Minister Farrakhan say that, next to God, the mother is the best friend that you have. And I'm certainly one who misses my mother and my father. I'm now, I hold, my sisters and I, we hold our parents now amongst the ancestors, and, constantly thinking on them and reflecting on words and experiences, and of course the wonderful memories. But it's just not the same. You know what I mean? So anybody that's blessed to still have their parents with them, call them, tell them how much you love them, thank them for everything that they've done for you and continue to do for you. And one just quick note, never take the position of judgment, because it's not our place to judge our parents. Were it not
at
for
all
God choosing them, we would not be here.
Despite
whatever their shortcomings may be, or however far off we may think they are from the right path, we're in no position to judge our parents. So that's on another note. We're blessed tonight to have another legendary guest and family member with us. The legendary Fab Five Freddy has blessed us with his presence, so we do not want to belabor bringing him on and engaging him in a dialogue and discussion, like with our brother Ernie Panicoli and like with so many others that we've been blessed to have as guests on this platform. He is a wealth of knowledge and experience, and tonight we're probably only going to be able to scratch the surface in this next hour or so that we'll have him with us. But let's do our best to extract as much as we can from our great brother who's with us tonight. Before we get into the dialogue with Fab Five Freddy, we're going to go to our sister Half Pint to give us a peace of mind.
Peace of mind.
Peace, my brothers and sisters. Tonight's homework and reading is The Falsification of African Consciousness, Eurocentric History, Psychiatry, and the Politics of White Supremacy by Amos Wilson. Wilson says, we must develop a psychology of our children based upon our own history and experience. When we get ready to create revolution, we must redefine the world and redefine words. There's no way around it. In Genesis, we see Adam being given the power to name things. The languages that people learn and speak are most frequently directly related to the power relations between them. People tend to learn first after their native tongue, whatever language is spoken by the people in power. There's a connection between the capacity to have other people speak your language and to call things by the names you give them and power. If we wish to assume power, then we must assume the capacity to name and define things. The psychology of a culture is to a great extent a symbolic precipitant of the kinds of experiences forced upon a group of people by their history. We must recognize that intimate relationship between culture, history, and personality. If we do not know our history, then we do not know our personality. If we only have the history of other people, then our personality has been created by that history. Peace, my brothers and sisters.
Thank you so much, Half Pint. We're going to move quickly to S1W James Bomb to give us the Louder Than a Bomb segment.
Peace, family. Once again, another Louder Than a Bomb segment where we are dealing with a 7-part series of police brutality in the black community. This is part 5 of that series. The policing of black Americans is racial harassment funded by the state. When the police job is to uphold a racialized law and order, black people can be arrested just for living our lives. What started out as a relaxing day at a Pennsylvania golf course turned into an ugly confrontation between police, white men who run the club, and 5 black women who were playing golf there because they was moving slow. 2 black men walked into a Starbucks downtown Philadelphia who happened to be waiting for their friend. Next was recorded on video, viewed more than 8 million times. This was April 15, 2018. Every racism required a performance when a black person navigates through white space. A black Yale student, graduate student, took a nap in her dorm's common area. This was May 12, 2018. A Dallas police officer shoot and killed a black man in his own apartment. 3 black people checked out of an Airbnb rental. Someone called the police on them. They was told a helicopter was tracking them and they was just taking their luggage to their cars. This is the kind of stuff that we live by every day in America. Darren Martin had the police called on him when he was just moving into his new apartment. Somebody called the police. This is something that happens every day to black people. Just living our lives, we can be arrested because somebody white called the police on us that said that we're doing something wrong. Peace, family.
Brother James, thank you. Just for the record, for anybody new that's listening tonight, this is December the 2nd, 2018. And
that's right.
This date, December 2nd, marks the 3-year anniversary of the brutal execution by firing squad of Mario Woods here in San Francisco. And we won't go into the history of it right now. You can go to mixcloud.com/hip-hop4 Justice podcast and listen, because on any of the ones that are there, as we are now officially, our podcast has officially launched, but you can hear us recounting the history of how this platform began. But just in short, for anybody that's on the line now listening to this live, we started as a result of the murder of Mario Woods by 5 members of the San Francisco Police Department who literally executed him, firing squad style, like what you would see in the cartoons with Elmer Fudd or Bugs Bunny or the old Western movies. The only thing missing was he wasn't blindfolded. He didn't have his wrist tied behind his back. He didn't have a cigarette dangling out of his mouth. He tried to walk away after the police surrounded him, shot him 3 times with the beanbag rifle, and literally executed him as he tried to walk away. That YouTube footage is available. You just type in the name Mario Woods and you can watch it. And that's really the reason why this is titled Hip Hop for Justice. We're not just taking trips down memory lane when we ask legendary artists or influential members of the hip hop community, like Fab Five Freddy is both artist and very influential within the hip hop community. But we're not just asking him to join us to take a trip down memory lane for no reason. Here's a man who, for all intent and purposes, was there from the very beginning and can talk to us about the prevailing set of circumstances that birthed this art form and developing culture that we all love. But he can share with us what it was like during that time and what he sees is different and what he sees is absolutely needed but may not be present at this time. Because all of us who know anything about the history of this art form and culture know that there is a significant change. And so, but getting back to this Mario Woods execution, it was the murder of our young brother that sparked the development of the Justice for Mario Woods Coalition. And out of that coalition's effort, of which I was a part, and Minister Farrakhan's representative here in this city, Student Minister Christopher Muhammad, was the point man. He was the leading man on the ground, leading the charge in the Justice for Mario Woods Coalition. So being with him in these meetings and at all of the events that we attended, actions that we took as a coalition, we saw, and as we studied as a coalition, knowing that there was an intense media blackout nationally on what happened to Mario Woods, not like with Laquan McDonald or not like with Freddie Gray or Mike Brown or Tamir Rice. The country saw those images, whether it was Cleveland, whether it was Ferguson, whether it was Baltimore. You saw that daily wherever you are in this country on the news. But with Mario Woods, you did not. And the reason you didn't is because it happened just 2 months before San Francisco, which just executed one of its sons. This city would be hosting the 50th anniversary of the NFL Super Bowl. The Gold Bowl was hosted by this city. So we were now going up against something more difficult because we had no Al Sharpton showing up. We didn't have any national figureheads that, are looked at or viewed as black leadership or people that, arrive on the scene when something like this happens. I was at Stephon Clark's funeral and Reverend Sharpton was there, but he wasn't here for Mario Woods, and Reverend Jackson wasn't here, and others. So The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was here and was guiding and directing the movement of the coalition through his representative, Student Minister Christopher Muhammad. What Brother James and I were blessed with was the thought to have a conference call and to ask, would Chuck and others assist us in gathering whoever we could get in a kind of like a moment's notice to get on a conference call. And we wanted to ask hip hop to stand up. That's what we called it, right, Brother James? In the beginning, we called it Hip Hop Stand Up, a nationwide conference call to action. And we asked members of the hip hop community to stand up, and would they lend their voice, lend the weight of their influence, utilize their social media platforms to help spread the word on what happened to Mario Woods. And now here we are 3 years later, and we continue to have meaningful dialogue, not just about, what hip hop was like back in the day, but we recognize that hip hop is in fact the leading art form on planet Earth. It's the most influential on planet Earth, and it has the ears of and the attention of the youth, particularly all over planet Earth. Therefore, there's a great duty and a great responsibility. Could it be that the enemy of your and my rise sees the power potential that hip hop is in fact potentially the light that will produce global revolution? Maybe that's why hip hop is being kept artificially young and dumb. Maybe that's why you're seeing the proliferation and the glorification of drug use by your favorite rapper. Maybe that's why. So these are the kind of conversations we like to have, and who else better than to have it with than the legendary Fab Five Freddy. So at this time, let us welcome the legendary Fab Five Freddy. Peace, my brother.
Peace. Great to be here. Great to get all
welcome. Welcome, and thank you for accepting the invitation. So we got Brother James, S1W, from the legendary Public Enemy, who you all were just together a couple of weeks ago. And we have our sister Half Pint, the legendary Son of Berserk, featuring No Self Control. Welcome, big brother, and thank you for accepting the invitation to be with us.
Yeah, sure enough. Good to be here.
So we know you to be a legendary graffiti artist. We know you to be a hip-hop pioneer and a hip-hop historian. And by virtue of just the length of time of service in this hip-hop culture and art form. And I would like to kind of go back to the beginning, if you don't mind, and
sure.
Tell us a little bit about how Fab Five Freddy came up and developed as a young artist, and then we want to get into the early years of the downtown art scene and how you were the bridge between the uptown graffiti and rap scene and the downtown art and punk scene. So let's go back there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no question. I'm out of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and coming up as a youth, a shorty in the 70s, what was really going on in the streets were the DJs that inspired what we know of as hip hop. Mobile disco DJs with, they take their sound, that whole plug your sound system into the street light and the parks and whatever. It's people like Pete DJ Jones and Plum and Boys, a whole bunch of guys that just DJed. Pretty much just blending records from record to record. And so I followed a lot of that and then heard little snippets of something different. Heard some break beats, heard some cutting, some scratching, talked to some DJs in Brooklyn, and they said there was something happening uptown. And then I would eventually, while making moves, trying to develop as an artist, taking the graffiti stuff that I did just as a wild teenage activity, not really trying to be creative, really. Doing that whole process of figuring out how to be an artist, coming into Manhattan, meeting other people, talking about this sound that I had heard coming from uptown. I got connected to people that knew a little something, got to hear some party tapes, Flash, Cold Crush. That's how the music really spread very early on. They would record the parties and stuff, and you'd hear these tapes on boom boxes, that music you didn't hear nowhere else. So I just got really curious early on, and was blessed to be around. And then I guess part of my curiosity and trying to figure out a way to be an artist, visual artist, and just to be in pop culture, all different avenues and areas, films and whatever I could do to create. I had an idea that became the movie Wild Style, and so that I got to bring all these ideas together to represent us in a more of a positive light. That was really the big inspiration for that, and a lot of the things I did there, along with trying to figure out a way in as a young black artist. You know, I guess along that whole journey that I figured these people in the punk and new wave scene kind of open to different ideas, and I eventually met people that were very open to these different ideas. And in that scene, I met Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring, and we all became friends. We all started trying to figure it out at the same time. And so that's a little bit about how all that happened. And then in the working, so basically I didn't really have a lot of people because of my role, and you know, so I guess the whole Wild Style thing turned out to be a bit more than I bargained for, because my ideas were I came up with the ideas, collaborated with Charlie Ahern. We worked together and to make the film.
How did you all meet? How did you and Charlie meet?
Once I got to Manhattan on the downtown scene and got around the whole new wave punk artist scene, I had thought that people would be open to these different ideas. And so in meeting certain people, they were open. And Charlie Ahern was one of those people I met at an art exhibit. So once again, I was functioning, doing different things. I was, plugging in, getting to be in some little really underground art exhibits, meeting other artists, meeting other people that were open to these ideas. And, I pitched this idea to make a film that showed all this stuff together. And because, my main motivation was to show us in a better light because of the negative portrayal of black youth, black and brown youth in the media was always only negative.
Share with us some of that negative portrayals at that time. And what time? What year would this be? Is this 80s?
70s. I'm talking 70s.
Still the
going
late
into
70s.
80s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this had gone on continuously, the portrayal of black youth.
Sure.
And because basically the way news works, newspapers, their editors, and TV, your local news channel, they pick what stories they want to showcase and highlight, and so they would pick and showcase ones that oftentimes put black and brown youth in negative light, and so it became almost like if you looked a certain way, people that watch the news would immediately associate black and brown youth with negativity. Right. Even if there weren't people that were, let's say, overtly racist, you just would get this image portrayed, pushed into your head. A kid that looks like this is going to do something bad to you, or he's always up to no good. And that was just a part of the dynamics of the city at that time. I mean, we're talking 30, 40 years ago. And the city, New York City, was much more polarized around racial lines.
Right.
So different communities, if a community was, let's say, Puerto Rican, or this community was black, or this community was Italian or whatever, or Jewish, or typically people didn't cross those boundaries in terms of hanging out or standing on the corner, going to a park in somebody else's neighborhood,
Right.
And in more working class neighborhoods like that, you can get physical real quick, but then if you had racist, tendencies, instincts, what have you, then it was even worse if you was in certain neighborhoods. One of the, the police killing us, unfortunately, has been going on for way too long. Obviously, one of the big things now is the video that everybody has on their phones, and the way we can access a lot more media, like even these things that you guys are doing. But I remember there was a murder back then in the 80s, I think, in a place called Howard Beach in Queens. There was some young brother that had a little traffic accident or whatever, and they was walking through this neighborhood, and these Italian cats rolled on them and chased them and beat them, and I think one, if not two, were killed. I think he was chased out in the traffic, and that was one of the instances where, Al Sharpton began to make his name, because these stories wouldn't have been as big as he forced them to become by marching, going into those neighborhoods and stopping traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge and whatever, making people address these issues when things like that were happening, along with police killers. But I guess it's so amazing now to have videos and the way social media has just forced these things. So many of these unfortunate incidents I've seen online, sometimes a week or 10 days before they become national stories. That's why I hear you talking about that brother Mario Woods and running up into the Super Bowl. It's unfortunate that story, I guess, didn't go viral in the way that more of us could know.
It was. But, it actually, just to jump in real quick, yeah. What we ended up seeing was, once we recognized that, hold up, the Super Bowl is coming. You know what I mean? Like, the Super Bowl is coming, and the city of San Francisco, and you already know this, Freddy, and Half Pint and James know. San Francisco is a go-to city, particularly now, for everything. I mean, everything we do, laptop, tablet, desktop, phone, etc. It's all based here, but San Francisco's always been a tourist attraction, number one or top 2 or 3 in the world.
No question.
So but it's a city that portrays itself to be very liberal, very progressive. But San Francisco has always had a very dark and dirty and ugly secret that it's kept. And what we ended up seeing was that the portrayal, the immediate release by the chief of police at that time was a man named Greg Sir. Mind you, this is just 3 years ago, but they immediately said that Mario, and you can look this up, anybody listening while we're talking on YouTube, they said Mario lunged at the officers. If anybody's ever done lunges, you know what lunges look like. He never, ever lunged towards, he never even walked towards the officers. When he turned to walk away, he literally, his right shoulder literally rubbed against a wall. What you'll see is one of the officers steps in front of Mario as he's trying to walk away, and within a second from stepping in front of Mario, he discharges his first shot, and then 4 other officers. There was 9 to 10 with their guns drawn, but 5 of them discharged their weapons on this 26-year-old brother who had a kitchen knife in his hand, and he never threatened them with the knife. So, but they immediately tried to criminalize him. They immediately went into his background about, he had been in jail before, he had issues here, he had an issue there. None of that they would have even known. The officers didn't know that at that time, and what difference does that make? He didn't deserve that type of treatment. And we can go run the list of those that we see. I mean, there's a viral video now with a white dude going dead off on the police, and I think Kango Kid actually posted it on Instagram when I first saw it, and on Facebook, talking about had this had been a black man, he immediately would have been killed. But then here you go, is this continued portrayal of us in this negative light that you're referring to. It's been happening, but what this platform did, though, Freddie, was it actually helped to bring national and even global attention to the murder of Mario Woods. So this platform played a very significant role in over time, Brother James and I, Half Pint, and the student minister for Minister Farrakhan here, Minister Christopher Muhammad, he actually helped us to see, the broader range and the broader impact and value of this platform. And so we began to reach out in our second year of 2017, asking artists to come on as guests. And that would be a way that we could activate more to get involved, because the Stop the Violence movement, Black Watch, the Rap Coalition, the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, but none of this is active anymore in a collective manner, and that's what we wanted to do, bring the activism back into hip hop in a collective manner. So that's kind of what we were blessed to do with this platform.
I feel you. Now, this is what we need to do. This is what needs to be done. Figuring out ways of utilizing the technology and ways of reaching people. It's very important. Really important.
Absolutely. I want to go back real quick to Wild Style. So Wild Style was released in September '82.
Correct. Well, released in America. Part of the story is, so when Charlie and I met at a very big art exhibit called the Times Square Show that was in Times Square back in the early 80s. Actually, it was in 1980. We immediately started working on a movie. I started taking Charlie up to the Bronx. I had never really been properly in terms of knowing where to go to find the parties and the jams, to hear Flash, Cold Crush, Fantastic, Busy Bee, and meet these guys. So that process began. And so we had examples of what we wanted to do in this movie. And the way, an independent film, we went around and tried to get funding and financing, and nobody gave us any support. And this was before practically any rap records are out. Maybe Rapper's Delight is out, and we're trying to say this is an example of what we're talking about. But most people thought it was a fad, thought it would blow in and out and be over soon. So we couldn't get any support. And we got connected to some people in Europe, in Germany, and in England, a German television station and a television station in England. Listened, liked it, believed in us, and gave us some money, and combined, that money was enough to really kind of get some things moving. And when we came back, we went back to some people that we met with, and they then jumped on board to support us, and we were able to get the film made. So the movie first aired on German television, let's say 81-ish, and also on television in England. And the thing that really blew my mind and was the beginning of things to come to this day was the fact we never believed this stuff. We didn't make this film for an international audience. We made it for the heads in New York City, in the hood, that we knew exactly who our target audience were, and for the arty friends that I had connected with downtown, like a part of that, underground artist scene that embraced me and allowed me to get this movie made. And then the film and the life of the film and the life of this culture never ceased to amaze me. How this, music primarily, just heavily based on the English language, people were able to feel and understand and then just reinterpret every language on the planet, and that continues to go on. And like I say, my mind is just still continually blown by the things that this culture continues to do. And the thing that I think, I know it's always an issue to try to figure out ways of elements of culture being more progressive and I'm definitely clamoring for that as well. Sometimes I think it's when brothers that grew up experiencing the heart and soul of this culture, also known as the golden era, the golden age, if you will, they're lament at a lot of what they hear. I sometimes tell them, look, I'm always fishing through the crowd to find young brothers that's got some brothers and sisters that got some decent content, that got some information, and because I'm all about those lyrics and whatever. And I often just tell people when they go, man, it's so whack right now. But I go, listen, there were whack records made back then. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Every record made back in the, you know what I'm saying? Every record making it. That's why I try to tell people, like, people talking about sucker MCs. It was really sucker MCs. Although now sucker MCs have gotten to the top of the charts, if you will. So I oftentimes tell people, like, you really can't think of, like, listen, you're not going to get it on them one or two on the radio stations in town or whatever, so you gotta, it's really, the thing is to know, I always tell people, you gotta get the right links, so we can log on and find those sites and links and the SoundCloud pages and the things like that for people that's doing things, like, that's what I'm finding that's more impactful. When a brother like my son drops a freestyle on Flex, and is really saying some things, because those little moments that pop up on Instagram, you see those things. I get really excited to hear, and even there's a bunch of young brothers out of Philly I've been seeing putting some clever clips up, addressing these issues in that type of rhythm and them type of trap beats or whatever they call it. You know what I'm saying? And those things give me some encouragement.
Yeah. You gotta look beyond the present moment. It can be a little difficult at times because we're so bombarded with it, and because of the advancement of technology allows you to get smacked across the head multiple times a day with whackness and sucker MCs and all of that.
A lot of whack.
It's a lot of it. But as long as we have people like yourself and Half Pint and James and others, who take a more mature, and there are many others, but you take a more mature look at the landscape. And basically like Grandma would tell us, he looked beyond my faults to see my needs, talking about God and the Lord. And, well, we got to do that with the younger, newer generation of artists that may not, and Master Ace addresses this in the new album with him and Marco Polo, Brooklyn Story. He actually addresses, this. And matter of fact, he did an interview with Sway. It was both up at Sway's spot a couple days ago, and they did an interview about it because, quite frankly, our family didn't understand. I know mine didn't necessarily understand me listening to License to Ill or, you know what I mean? Any Run DMC records. Yeah, you're right. Understand that. So, we had to contend. We got to contend with it too with this generation. But the beauty of having brothers like yourself, James and Half Pint and others, Chuck and Wise Intelligent and Cam and others that have grown and matured, but you become like the Hip Hop Council of Elders, where you begin to, you really are in a position to guide, not necessarily dictate for them. You need to sound like Chuck, young man. We need to hear more, substantive lyrical content, but there's only one Chuck D. There's only one Wise Intelligent. There's only one Brother J. There's only one My Son. But we got these young artists who got tens and hundreds of thousands of followers. And if they, as Ernie said last week, Half Pint and Brother James, remember Ernie was telling us, he said, man, if you got, a certain amount of time on your album, dedicate a song. Dedicate this many minutes to addressing the real issues that are taking place, and you'll start seeing the people degree by degree awaken. You know what I mean? Yeah. I wanted to ask you though, Freddie, because I saw an interview, or matter of fact, not a presentation that you did, and you said, forgive me if this is not an exact quote. I tried to get it, but you said something to the effect of Wild Style served as the basis for hip hop culture globally. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh yeah, that's probably pretty close, because what it was the ideas that we put together in that film, showing 4 or 5 elements, if you will, the rapping, the DJing, the graffiti, and the dancing, because that this thing was able to translate and travel the world and inspire people in multiple languages, especially people that were marginalized, you know what I'm saying, everywhere on the planet, they all kind of picked up on these cues and said, that's me, I can do that. And so that's what happened. And so what you have with Wild Style and the beginnings of hip-hop and many other places, the first people that were the equivalent of their old school will tell you stories about seeing this movie some way, somehow, and going, oh my God, this is it. It's interesting when you see how this culture spread. There's these little stories, like another little story. Like, I've spent a lot of time down in Brazil, fascinating country with the second largest population of people of African descent outside of the continent of Africa. Right. Hip hop, massive down there. And when I traveled to Brazil in the early 2000s, if you go on my website, which is my name, fab5freddy.com, that's the number 5, Freddy, DDY.com, there's an article I wrote for Vibe in the early 2000s about my exploits down in Brazil. It's a 5,000-word article. And I had a translator helping me move from ghetto to ghetto in Rio and Sao Paulo, talking to these cats about how they were able to connect with this culture. A lot of them had tapes and copies of videos, but on the graffiti side, they had Xerox copies or photocopied Xerox, right? That's real old school. Remember when you called it copy, like a Xerox? Yeah, baby. You know what I'm saying? Xerox copy. Yeah, I go back. But they had copied machine copies of Martha Cooper's Subway Art, Henry Chalfant's first books that documented the subway graph, from the masters. And that was the sparks. There were kids that had copies of that looked and figured out how to make paintings themselves, just from seeing copies of these books, along with getting VHS copies, third generation VHS copies of Wild Style. Like, I had cats talk to me, translated, like they remember seeing me interviewing Naughty by Nature, like in Central Park. And I'm like, and these guys didn't speak a word of English. So that was just the thing that really was inspiring, just to see that Wild Style was this thing that lets you know, here's the face of the people doing it, here's where they live, you could tell it was the hood, you know what I mean? And it inspired a lot of people to get involved. And then Yo MTV Raps would do that a little later on, like Wild Style was the early 80s, and the late 80s, 88 in particular, which was like a real pivotal year in the game, was when Yo MTV Raps just hits the air. And that, a lot of people didn't realize that Yo MTV Raps was put on MTVs all over the world. So in Asia, in Europe, people got to tune in. And then once again, that was the VHS era. People was making them tapes and hitting their mans off, So those are some of the most incredible stories to this day. Is cats from other places, like from around the planet, that'll stop and tell me stories about how their man had a copy sent to him from his man of a Yo MTV Raps tape, and what that meant to them. It's just amazing to imagine these cats. And then even with Public Enemy and the conscious stuff, because there's a whole conscious hip-hop movement in Brazil, kind of like a militant conscious thing. These guys all talked about Public Enemy and seeing these videos from their time as if they understood the lyrics, but really as a video director and as a filmmaker myself, it told me that the visuals alone was enough for people to understand what was being said. And that's something that we take for granted, but for film to really work, and this is some real film school type shit, you're supposed to be able to tell a story without hearing words. And those videos that really told a story where you can turn the sound off and just go, wait, yeah, I can figure out what's happening here. That's kind of how these videos translated around the world, and that's kind of mind-blowing for me to have cats in Brazil, ghetto cats that spoke near word of English, figure out that they was going to rap in their own language, Portuguese. So that's a little example of how this culture translated, and being on the front line of that, because Wild Style was one of those tools, and people got access to MTV Rap some way, somehow, and just was like, yo, like, how could I get more?
And the revolution is starting with a tape, Brother James. The revolution is starting with a tape.
That's right. That's
so
right.
I want to bring James and Halftime in to engage, ask any questions, and of course comment. But and I want to go back to the Yo MTV era because that was '88, and like you said, it was super pivotal. But before Yo MTV Raps, you got into directing, and I want to get into that too.
Right.
So let's bring Halftime before I go do all of that. Let's bring Halftime in, and then we'll go to Brother James. Halftime.
Peace, everybody. Peace, Brother Fab Five, Freddy. So I just want to let you know that I in my classroom, in my other life, I am an educator, and I do teach history of hip hop, and I show Wild Style for the very purpose of all of the elements, and so that they can see it in its glory and its heyday, and as the pioneers. So I would love for you at some point, possibly, to speak to my kids so that they know and they can hear from you firsthand, from someone that's been there. And we're working on, as a coalition, the Hip Hop for Justice, we're working on a virtual academy. So your plethora of information would definitely be key in us sharing and preserving the history of hip hop. So I would definitely appreciate.
That would be dope. Yeah, I'd love to do that. And one of the ways I've done that with other friends that are educators in different places is we could do a Skype thing, and if they could figure out a projector, throw it up on the wall, like it did, I keep it real funky live out of my house,
Yes, we do. We are set up for that. So I will be reaching out to you for that when we get to those segments. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Now, my question is about what is your take on the evolution of women in hip hop from what you've experienced and you've seen, especially since you were a key part of the medium that allowed us to be visual more so than just the auditory. What do you think about the evolution of us, though?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I was, it's funny, I was kind of instrumental in Queen Latifah getting signed, and then also directing her first 2 videos. So very proud to have gotten to mold and shape the image of a woman in the game who still continues to have great impact. But at that time, it was a situation where Latifah was a certain individual, and I kind of knew the space she was in. I mean, she was a very strong woman, but I wanted to depict her in a way that reflected that, and I think it worked. And recently I was interviewed for a documentary that they're doing on the channel, and they were looking at the video I directed, Ladies First. And it was really interesting to kind of really think back at the ideas and the visuals that we laid down, and what a strong and positive kind of visual I was able to kind of put forth, and how she was able to carry through with that. But then it made me think about all the different transitions that I've seen women, or the different kind of roles, like going into like a hypersexualized, and maybe playing too much into that. I think with some artists, some of those moves and developments feel more organic than those that are just trying to follow what they think is going to sell records. So I guess it's kind of I guess my answer can it can go on and on and on, because there's different levels of people making records or making music and what they're trying to do it for. You know what I'm saying? Some people are really trying to create and go someplace that we haven't been. That's in my kind of term, the way I get down, that's the true definition of an artist. But then as soon as you get a record deal, or as soon as you start spitting anything that you record to a beat, people are referred to as artists when they're really not. So there's some interesting things where some women are pushing it. I can't think of this sister's name, but I saw this sister that released, I think she's out of New York, dark-skinned, attractive sister, but she made this EP and she shot a video for each song, and they're very unique and different. They're short, but each video had a completely different idea and theme and everything. And once again, that for me was something I hadn't seen before. And as an artist, literally, that's the things that I'm attracted to. I was like, wow. I mean, this was next level. I wish I could think of her name, but so I kind of just look at what's going on and have seen things go through different incarnations, and sometimes things are cyclical. They'll go really extreme one way and then swing back around, but they'll swing back around in a way that we didn't totally expect, you know? So I'm always open for that because I've seen it happen so many times and been surprised by things that I see from male and female.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Half Pint. I'm going to get Brother James to jump on in. Brother James.
Okay, now I'm really fascinated at some of the things that I see that you accomplish, but the thing that stick out most in my mind is you doing your first on-camera interview, and you talked about your work at the Fun Gallery. How did you translate? Wow. How did you translate your the artwork? How you were able to make the guy Bill Stellings and Patty Austin? Yeah. How were you able to translate to for them to understand what you trying to convey to them?
That's interesting. That's a good question. So a lot of that, obviously I was on a specific mission trying to figure out a way to make it happen as an artist. But the way it specifically happened was kind of not really planned out. So when we were putting Wild Style, I was making moves, meeting people, being in little shows like that Times Square show I talked about where I met Charlie Ahern and we started working on Wild Style. This woman, Patty Astor, had been in downtown underground movies, super low-budget movies. She knew Charlie, I had met her at a party but didn't really know her, but she heard we're making this movie and one of the characters is a reporter. So she came to audition for the movie. We weren't really thinking of going to give her the part, but we were she was going at it really hard. In the process of her trying to get the part, she mentioned that this guy Bill had this little small space. She had met a bunch of friends. Why don't we have a little art show? She decided, but it really wasn't supposed to be a serious gallery. It really was just a fun, let's play gallery kind of a vibe. So she asked me would I do a show, and I was like, sure, why not? Because and then I had this place was so small. It was in this basement room that was no more than the place wasn't any more than about 8 or 9 feet wide and about 11 or 12 feet long. It was a really small space. And when I had my show there, a buzz had started happening, and serious art collectors showed up. And I was surprised, and Patty Astor was surprised. And before we knew it, it got real serious real quick. We was just trying to have some fun, but the energy and the timing was right. There were no art galleries in the East Village at that time. All the galleries were in Soho. And before we knew it, Patty, who was an underground film actress, and Bill was not in any, they just oh my goodness, we have an opportunity to have a real gallery. And most of our friends and other people that I hung with, we were all artists trying to get our thing popping. Tour 2000, Keith Haring, Kenny. It was just a crew of us that started hanging out, that were all trying to figure out a way in. And this gallery in the East Village became that. And then it moved to a little bigger location, and that's where that interview is that you can find on YouTube. And I'm gonna tell you, I was a little nervous during that interview. Jean-Michel had hit me off with some cannabis that was a little stronger than I was ready for, and it had me really, really, really paranoid. And I'm trying to talk, and my mouth was dry, and I couldn't really think. I was a little nervous. So when I see that interview, it made me remember what it was. So I learned how to not be on any kind of intoxicants when I'm talking to the press.
So, like with that, like with you being able to translate that to them, they was able to understand what you was trying to convey to them. The same is like really is fascinating to me in those early days, because I'm looking at a picture of your 1979. You sprayed with spray enamel on a canvas, and you was able to I think it was 46 by 66, and I'm guessing that was pretty big. But the tagging scene, and they was tagging, they would do different things during that time. See, now hip hop for me, I grew up in the South. Where I grew up at, I'm there now, and hip hop was the radio station here in Florida, where in the Glades area, the hip hop scene was mostly like Miami. Miami was the hip hop scene, but it was more like reggae and reggae artists coming from Jamaica, and it was a rhythmic talk, like they was talking, but they was rapping. That's what they was doing. But they was coming into Miami, and they was doing the Miami bass music, and they was rolling with it, and it was just something weird. But Luke was like a big DJ in Florida in those days, and he was just pushing it out.
Those ghetto DJs, they called it, right? But
exactly.
It was a group of
It was a group of them. They was like hitting from West Palm Beach to on the Glades. They would come like various areas from Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach down, Liberty City, Overtown, and they would be out in the park just rocking. That was my experience of hip-hop during those early days. But when I left here in '83, I went to New York, and then the hip-hop scene was so, oh my God, it was so amazing for me, because I was into art at that time. I was drawing and different things like that. So it was amazing how I saw the different graffiti, and then meeting, Hank and Keith and Eric, and and they was orchestrating things on Long Island. So hip hop coming from Florida to New York, well, I came straight to Long Island. I didn't go anywhere else. But from Florida to Long Island, hip hop was like a major thing. It just blew my mind when I heard the different sounds and the Crash Crew, and it was like, because my first experience with hip hop was more of the Caribbean, because my grandfather's from Jamaica, and then the music was coming, and we was bumping the music here. So, and then it was Luke Camel, Uncle Luke putting it, and he putting his
listen, I just got to jump in. I just got to jump in, to tell you that. So now, when Yo MTV Rap starts, we realize now, and I'm a New York guy, born, bred, collard green, fed, right? But I realize now that we gonna have to really look at things happening across the country, because the show's going to be national. The first opportunity for Yo MTV Raps to travel, which was the big thing that my show did, was to Florida. Because at that point, Luke had, I guess it was Me So Horny blowing up. So I guess it was one of the first few videos that we had, and we went down to cover this guy, Luke Skywalker, and the 2 Live Crew at the time. He had to cut the Skywalker out.
Right, that's right.
We go down there, and it was like a Christmas Eve. I remember the Christmas thing, and this was so early on that South Beach still had the old retired Jewish people living there, and there were hookers up and down Collins, right? On Collins and Washington, still workers and crackheads. It was so grimy, right? Miami Vice was still popping. We did one of the little segments right there in that part, but then we had to go to Liberty City. And Luke took us out there, and I'm like, this wasn't long after one of the riots out there. And seeing the people, obviously I couldn't understand what the music was about until we went to a party, and I saw that it was just all about fun and a good time, how everybody was singing, dancing, laughing, and to see that energy, and then I was like, okay, now I got it. This is some dance, have a good time, fun vibe. And so that was the first time that Young TV Rap traveled.
Wow. See that?
And I don't know if you saw Hip Hop Evolution, that new series on Netflix.
Yeah, I'm checking it out now. Yeah.
Yeah, so that Luke breaks a lot of that his history down, which I think was really dope. How he came up, and then they got into that freedom of speech thing, which also coincided with me on MTV, because MTV got fully behind that. That was interesting that it was another aspect of how racism works in the industry, because Andrew Dice Clay had a big comedy album out, and he was cursing every 4-letter word you can think of, and it was a big album, Luke, you can see, and the way they illustrated it, showing the people how they arrested him and stuff, and they fought those battles and they won. So it was fascinating, that Miami history. And then I got to understand all the Caribbean influences, because I directed almost all the Shabbos videos. I grew up close to that, to the Jamaican dancehall thing coming up in Brooklyn. So I did Mr. Loverman, Trailer Load, you know what I mean? I did like 5 videos for Shabbos,
Oh, okay. That's excellent, man. Look, now this thing is gone from the times where now, and you was part of the architect of the art scene and able to push graffiti. Now I'm in Russia, Moscow.
Whoa. Okay.
And we've seen artwork on the walls in just about every little European place. We're seeing graffiti, and these guys are following what we're doing in America. And this is the stuff that actually just really fascinates me the most, is when I see them doing what we doing and mimicking how we dress and how we talk and the culture. Now, Ernie said last week that hip-hop is not a culture, it's an art form. It has the potential to be a culture, but it's missing elements in terms of... So from the first time I heard that, I was like, yeah, I could understand it, but then I'm going to agree with it, because culture has to have certain elements, and for it to be a culture, for it to be fully a full culture. So when I see artwork and see the different things and people visually telling hip-hop, like the night that we was all at the Kennedy Center that Friday night, and they're visually telling the story of hip-hop with pictures. Right. If you told the story right now of hip-hop from that time to this very moment, how would you tell that story from this time now? How would you put it?
No, well, I get where you're going. That's a good question, because and it's a good way of thinking about it, because oftentimes, having been blessed to have experienced so much of this, it's fascinating, and I get asked all the time, like, favorite rapper, top 5 or whatever. I go, I get where they're going, but I would break it down into different eras, because there's been different eras in the game where 5 or 10 cats clearly dominated different eras, and the music changes and the voices change and things change along with it. So kind of like, let me make sure I got your question again. You fire it at me one more time.
Well, like from the time you came to hip hop and the things you've seen in hip hop, and from now, how do you view hip hop in this present moment? And because it's like you said, the characters and stuff, and I just don't like when we call it old school, because it's constantly evolving. So when I view it, sometimes I don't necessarily use words when I view it. I'm thinking in my mind's eye like, damn, if we can come from this era to this era and see how everything has grown. Right. I think with the technology, it has helped the young people who doing hip hop. Now it's sort of like how Miles used to say, is like he would say certain things, and I can't quite remember how it went. You said it, Brother Miles, but I'm gonna say it like this here. We can't allow our children to teach us. If we dictate it, they're going to put their own spin on it. True. But if we're sharing it with them and we kind of guiding them with it, it could go however we want it to go. But my thinking is with the visual part of it, how would you put it visually today to oppose to that time era from...
I mean, the thing is now it's amazing that that hip hop still dominates in one form or another, because as the music evolves, it's like, and that's the kind of catch-22 is who is to say what is hip hop and what is not. Now, there's no governing body. However, because a lot of us have had a heavy hand in dictating what this is, and this was the first genre of music, even though we didn't really control it, the business and the means of distribution, we've had a heavy say-so in how it looks, how it feels, etc., etc. Yeah, there have been times when a record company might have said, hey, go this way, or a lot of times we have too many artists that are really easy to just want to copy whatever's out there just for the sake of getting paid. So I'm saying all that to say that the kind of hip-hop that I think you and I probably could agree on, and all of us on this call, most of us on this call, is the way we get access to it has completely changed. And that's one of the most kind of radical things, if you think about, okay, during the brief period when on TV Raps, it just so happened to be in a really pivotal period where we introduced a lot of people that define what the culture is, and we was running that. It wasn't like nobody was saying, hey, this new Eco Suave or Vanilla Ice or whatever it was that was certifiably like not fitting. Nobody said you have to play that, and we was always pretty much in agreement on what was whack and what wasn't. And so, and then you have one or two radio stations and a couple of DJs, so it was very few points of access that in the pivotal period of time we were able to get good stuff. Now the points of access are we can access 1 million songs from just hundreds of thousands of songs on our handheld devices, and everywhere else is all these platforms where we have access to this music. So it's like the whole thing is everybody's using the term curate, which is a term that comes out of the art world, or aggregate, or figuring out a way to who can pull together for me what I'm feeling right now. I'm still fascinated when I may walk into a restaurant, because I remember back in the days when hip restaurants downtown Manhattan hired cool DJs, a lot of them I knew, to give their restaurants a cool, groovy soundtrack. So that became a standard thing damn near everywhere now. I walk into restaurants sometimes now, and I'm sitting down, and I'll hear one song, 2 songs, 3 songs, 4 songs. Wait a minute. Oh, this is kind of fly. I'll pull the waitress over. Excuse me. Yo, what DJ, like who? I don't even ask now. Now I know, but what I would ask is a DJ put the soundtrack together, and the waitress looked around. I'm not supposed to tell you, but it's Pandora. I'd be like, what? You know, see the algorithm of some of these things to put it together like things that sound like, feel like that which you like, you know, whether it's from this era, that era, you know how it goes with the technology. Right. And those are some of the ways that you could, you know, customize and tailor it down to what you want to listen to. Some of what the younger heads do, I'll skim through. I may listen to 1 or 2 tracks. I mean, I personally think, and I had a talk with that kid, Mike Will, Maiden, one of them big trap producers or whatever. And I was like, you know, the way I think of a lot of what them young Southern type cats are doing for me, it feels like something that should be termed rap soul, you know? Right. I feel like you could say it's a part of hip hop, but it's not really. I think there was enough of hip hop done over such a broad spectrum of styles and attitudes, from gangster to daylight, you know, so many spectrums. It's like you can almost say, well, if you have 4, 5, or 6 of these elements, you know, some you know, real lyrical content, and you know. Right. You know what I mean? If there's a way, you could be like, okay, this all fits under hip hop. Some of these things that these cats, these young cats are doing, they're very interesting to me. But the song structure, the lyric, is not about a flow. They kind of like almost created their own genre of something. Right. And I think it should be. It's like rap soul, because a lot of them have a little melody. It feels a little slightly bluesy. It makes me think of the history of black music. So much stuff from the South, that blues mentality. That was more of a Southern type of mentality, you know what I mean? Which is the base of what all the music came from. A lot of these cats are the great-great-grandchildren of the Muddy Waters and cats like that. Right. It's interesting how that New York energy was the faster, slicker, you know, talking shit, finger popping. That's what gave birth to this thing we know of as hip hop. That Southern thing is a different energy, which is the basis upon which a lot of hip hop is built. Like a lot of those loops and structures from them 70s, 60s, you know, 80s loops. You know what I mean? That was that greasy, fried, you know, that fat back in the, you know, that real soulful kind of thing. So I kind of try to open my mind and look at it in those broader terms. But and if there was a way that I can get those cats to agree, because I think I think rap soul is a lot. If that could be made into a category, it could be like, it could help like people that like a Kendrick, like a J. Cole, like young guys that really got bars and content, you know, and there's younger cats that got bars and content that can be in a space where, you know, it could just, you know what I mean? It could put things. It's like a rap. So it's like a rap thing. They like rapping and singing at the same time, like Drake. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's interesting and blend. But they're doing it though. Like they really. J. Cole's doing someone. And when I first heard this stuff, I was like, wow, this dude is really. But it sounds good. But it's a different thing now. But when you carry that particular, like we're talking about various things that goes on in the States, but when you go to like England and some parts of Europe and even Japan, where when you get there with the art scene and the hip-hop culture, like Major Force Posse with my man Khan, I've been knowing this dude for 30 years, and they took hip-hop
in Japan and what we was doing over here, and they just like pushed it to another level. And I'm like, wow. And these dudes are taking what we doing in the 70s, what happening from 79 on. They're flipping it, and now what was happening at that time is now happening right now in Japan and England. Like the art, the graffiti is more, it's more prevalent there, and it's still like it was that when it was in the 80s, in the early days.
Well, you know, that's something that's, what you say is true. And when I've traveled in some countries, like being in Brazil over different times, I felt like this is, and listening to what they're making, even though it's different, the simple basic structure of some of it reminds me of different points where hip hop music was here. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you can obviously compare a lot, and then too, a lot of what they did in Brazil on their dance music came out of that Miami bass attitude. You know, the kind of like thing. So they got right into that. A lot of that kind of booty dancing thing that goes along with some of that Miami Southern music, which some of that is the Caribbean Afro influence is alive in Brazil's this situation too. But also, it's also similar. Like you mentioned England, I think, and it's fascinating now that they back when I was doing Young TV Raps, I go over to England a couple of times and interview cats. I remember London Posse was the big group that everybody was going to break London big. Posse, but the thing was, and I would have those cats on my show, but the thing was, none of those cats ever really connected because they were always hoping that they would get picked up over here as well. So they were trying to really do what we were doing. Eventually, what they did, what Cookie Crew and all them, I directed one of their videos. Eventually, what happened in London is the grime thing developed. It started, and now they got some cats over there, man, that are so big. They have their complete own kind of fast rap style with the London slang. And there's a bunch of cats that are massive in England and other parts of Europe, and they're cool. They're not even trying to tap into this market over here. But what they developed, though, when you hear it, is completely unique and their own thing. So, and they call it grime, and it's called grime. The first cat that set it off. Oh man, I can't think of his name right now. There was a cat that got big with in the early 2000s. But anyway, grime is their whole thing. So that's, I think the problem, once again, which I have, is just figuring out how could I get access, because you miss having that one or two, that good DJ that you knew was going to be where you needed him to be playing what you want to hear. And I think it's also interesting, too, and reflective of the fact that there is a huge audience for what we're talking about, because one of the biggest new formats in radio have been variations of the 90s hip-hop, R&B stations. In all the big markets, there's one of those stations now, playing classics, which, of course, is a huge demographic, so it's just... Yeah, a little snapshot.
I want to jump in, Brother James, on this, because as we're
yes, sir.
We took a global tour real quick, and it's always good when Brother James. I've never traveled, Freddie, outside of the country, so having Brother James by my side, he can always really nail the global perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He can give us that. Because when you mention Brazil, or if you mention, different areas throughout South America or in the UK, he's been there with Public Enemy, and so he has that firsthand experience multiple times. You're talking about over 30-year period. So
I know
it's a great balance for these conversations. But I want to bring it back because as you mentioned in some of your responses, these many videos that you've directed, I kind of want to go back to something that I saw you say in, I think, matter of fact, it was the same presentation that you gave. You were leading into your, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, your directorial debut with KRS-One's My Philosophy.
Right.
So you mentioned how you wanted to direct Public Enemy, and that you
that's how it all started.
Right. You said I put together a few treatments for a few of them songs on that first album.
I wrote about 5 or 6 songs on the first album from Russ's show. Yeah, man. This is something that you said, though. This is something that you said that I thought was deep, and I wanted to expound. I wanted you to expound on it. You said that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a part of that desire was because you grew up in a home with conscious brothers who were of the same mind, that were ready to make change and shake up the world and make things better for people of color. So I kind of want to, we got about maybe 10 or 15 more minutes left. I want to kind of bring it back to that statement. Sure, because I'd love to. Here we are now. We just took a little bit of a world tour, a journey over the globe with you and James. But what it says, though, it just bears witness to hip hop being the dominating art form on planet Earth. This is planet Earth, planet rap. Right. You know what I'm saying? So, and no matter where you are, if it's the favelas in I don't know if I said that right, the ghettos in Brazil, or if it's the ghettos wherever you are, it's touching the people there organically. It's speaking to them, even if it's in English and they don't even understand it. It resonates, Totally. So you had a desire to direct Public Enemy, then that didn't happen. But you went into directing. You said you took some of those ideas and you brought that to the My Philosophy KRS-One video. If you could share a little bit of what that experience was like, being that was your first shot out the gate, and it was KRS-One, and that's one of the major KRS-One records. Share with us a little bit about that, and then I want to kind of tie it in to the present day and what you think is missing and is much needed in today's hip hop culture and art form, and what our role is in this overall cultural revolution. Because you did make that statement as well. You mentioned, you used the terminology cultural revolution, and I just think you're right. Okay, so let me give it to you like this. So my father, I was blessed to, part of my family background is my grandfather was a staunch Garveyite. My father's father. Wow. Yeah. And so, and he ran the East Brooklyn chapter of the UNIA. So I'm from that ilk of West Indians that was on the Garvey side of the thing. It's interesting because the house that I own and live in here in Harlem was a person from the Talented Tenth, a brother by the name of George Edmund Haynes, who was tight with W.E.B. Du Bois. And I often think, wow, this is so ironic. The home I live in was one of those people here, one of that kind of black folk back then. But my grandfather was with the folks that was down with Marcus. So my father, now coming up under that, coming from a West Indian background, my dad kind of veered off of that strict West Indian thing, and he got down with jazz, where he was very open. He was an accountant, and he had read some of everything, and was very fascinated about, I guess in the 50s, when the African countries were trying to get liberation, my dad was listening to those other voices that were speaking about an alternative way for black folks and oppressed peoples to basically express themselves and to get out from under, all that pressure and what have you. So my father was mad open to everything. He read Marx, Lenin, Mao Zedong, and these was hip guys. And then he was best friends with Max Rhodes, who was my godfather. That was a prominent bebop jazz drummer. So I had like a lot of these like very sophisticated, hip, intellectual black men, thinking black men around, talking about, you know, the way jazz was accepted in different parts of the world. They were treated like humans, and they was talking about what was going on in different continents and countries. And I didn't realize this until I grew up, got older, how much of this influence and sense of cool and sense of intelligence mixed with cool like rubbed off on me and inspired the things that I would later do. And being able to talk to Max Roach, who was a big supporter of the music and all that kind of stuff, was, big and inspired me. With the Public Enemy thing, and my father also went to hear Malcolm X talk often and happened to be in the room when Malcolm X was assassinated in the Audubon Ballroom. So he was like going to these rallies, hearing these talks, and friends of my father would have tapes of Malcolm, and they would gather because my father had read the most stuff, and they would all be at my house in Bed-Stuy. And as a kid growing up, this, along with all the hip stuff and the cool stuff and being talked about, these things were being taught. So I heard a lot of these things, and they were very much plugged in on these issues. And so I'm a kid, not focusing, but I'm picking up on these things. So when as I'm in the position of what I've done in hip hop, and I was really a visual artist, like the whole idea of rap video, there wasn't many outlets for it, but I had seen other white groups doing videos, and I thought, wow, what a cool way to express, what the group's about. And then I got to hear some of Public Enemy's early music, because I knew Glenn Friedman, and Glenn, who did the photos for a bunch of Chuck's early records and stuff, and a lot of early Def Jam records. He first played me. In fact, he played me the early demo that Rick Rubin had. Rick Rubin called Chuck every day for 2 years to try to get him to do a group, and Chuck didn't want to do it. I love that story every time Chuck tells it. But I heard that first thing, which I guess they had did for the radio station out there, and I was like, yo, this is fucking incredible. So I knew what was coming, and then later I got to hear more, and I was just like, yo, what he was talking about, the imagery, the whole 9 yards. Like, I just knew what he was inspired by. So I was writing concepts for different songs on the first album, and I would go by Green Street all the time and be in the South. So it was fascinating because they were the first album was out, but they were working on Fear of a Black Planet. I actually helped put my hands up with that.
Was it Fear or was it Takes a Nation?
It Takes a Nation, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It Takes a Nation when they were mixing that, the second album. But anyway, Chuck really is fascinating. He didn't really break it down in terms of the numbers then. He would be interested because he was a huge fan. He knew about Wild Style. He knew about, the record that I had made that every DJ cuts for that fresh sound. This stuff is fresh.
Change the beat.
French and English. Change the beat, exactly. So like Chuck was all the smart DJs always knew about that, which was the greatest thing in the world to me before I knew all this other stuff was going to happen. Like, that these DJs knew who I was because that record had just become this thing that DJs had to have to, scratch. And we'd have these great meetings, but ultimately it was just fun to be around them and watch these guys make these records and they be in the studio and just to see that incredible intelligence of the Bomb Squad, Hank, Keith, Eric Sadler. It was just these are the smartest cats in hip hop without question at that time. So to be around that was just like, wow. It felt like my dad and his friends when I was a kid coming up. Like, they were just real smart brothers that was talking about shit, but these guys and what I wanted to do, and that also would motivate me. Like, I wanted to do shit, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just really wanted to be proactive and figure out ways of making things happen. And lots of what I heard and absorbed from those, my dad and his friends, really, I constantly think about it more and more and more, as you grow older. But what happened was, I was really like campaigning. I was going around Russell, Rick, everybody to try to get a Public Enemy video, and campaigning and pitching is really what I was doing. And this woman named Ann Carley that ran Jive Records, A&R, said, "Hey, I got a video. I heard you trying to get a Public Enemy video. Well, I want you to do a video for KRS-One." And I was like, sure. And as soon as I got the music and I saw KRS-One posing in the window with the Uzi looking out the window like Malcolm X, the By Any Means Necessary poster where he was looking out the window like with the rifle in his hand, protecting his family, I right away knew what, even before I heard the record, I knew exactly what he was thinking about, and I knew that a lot of the ideas I developed for the numerous Public Enemy videos I wanted to direct, I knew this look, feel, aesthetic, and ideas would work, and that became my philosophy.
Yeah, that's just an incredible story, and I wanted to kind of wrap up on that page to basically get to this final question, because the way you referenced, your upbringing, just in that little interview that I saw, you didn't go into detail then the way you just did now. What you just gave me speaks volumes, and I'm sure I speak for Brother James and Half Pint. Like, if we didn't know that about your upbringing, even to the home that you live in now, there's no such thing as a coincidence. Everything happens for
I believe that. I do believe that.
That is a beautiful backdrop that helps me understand you even greater now. And I wanted to wrap it up because of your being around Public Enemy and obviously having a burning desire to work with them on the video side, and then going to work with someone as iconic as KRS-One, who came out and hit us over the head with My Philosophy, with Criminal Minded, and all of that.
Yeah, some big joints, right?
Incredible, iconic. But now I want to ask you in the present time and kind of wrap up with this. What is your view? And we touched on it, but what is your view based on what we just covered of hip-hop today, and what's needed based on the prevailing set of circumstances that you see in the black community, in the country, and in the world? What do you think is needed?
I think we need to figure out ways to be more effective with these tools that we have at our disposal, which are incredibly powerful. And I think these tools have been used. I think we can be better. When something goes viral, when somebody does something to us, and it's fascinating the way the memes are created to laugh a person into having to really beg and say I'm sorry for these crazy things. But I think that's the tip of an iceberg that can be bigger, of us being able to kind of form and be more effective to speak out and against things that are unjust, and to realize, how to be more effective with these tools that we have. I mean, because it's easy for us to kind of be funny and to be clownish with them. It's also effective the way they've been the first way I've heard about police murder of innocent black youth or black people of any kind. And that's what I'd like to see us get better at. You know what I mean? Like, when I see my son and these cats figuring out ways of using these platforms in a 1-minute format to really make me go, yeah. You know what I'm saying? I want to see more of that.
No, I agree.
I think that's the easiest thing for us to kind of change, because we've already taken ownership to a certain extent of these abilities, and we've seen how we could form this one voice when situations arise. And I think that's the beginning of something that could be something else. I don't know exactly what it is, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, I got
incredible
you.
Where we are, that grapevine.
I got you. I think that we're in, to say this and kind of throw it out there, when we look at the overall grand scheme of things, we're in a race against time.
Wow.
When you really look at and I say this all the time, the prevailing set of circumstances in the black community, in the country, and in the world, because it doesn't matter if it's Fab Five Freddy or if it's Mr. Fab or Fabulous. It doesn't matter who it is, or just a cat named Freddy in the hood. You can't swipe down your timeline without seeing some type of madness when it comes to our community specifically. Whether it's disrespectful engagements, dehumanization by the police, brutality, beatdowns, killings, or if it's us engaging one another in that type of manner, we're seeing it, right? And we can't help but see it. It's on the timeline now. Now, how, unfortunately, when you're in a race against time, time is not your friend. So you gotta seize the time. And I'm gonna sneak in one last question to you, just based off of what you said. Do you see the need for the type of discussion and dialogue that we're having or we're concluding right now? Do you see a need to bring these type of conferences or hip-hop town hall meetings where we, I see Joe Budden in the state of the culture, right? And I see what Noriega's doing, and I see, of course, with Sway and Breakfast Club, and of course what Combat Jack was doing.
Oh man,
but
my man there, yes.
This type of discussion, we got to leave the alcohol at home. We got to leave the rumors and the gossip and the donkey of the day type discussions or dialogue. We got to leave all that at home. Right. The type of discussion that we're having, we mixed in some of the history. We got to get to know Fab Five Freddy. For those that don't know him,
yes, sir.
We wanted to do that, but we had more meat and substance of what must be done, and the responsibility of the culture and the artistic community, because as Nina Simone said, it's the duty of an artist to reflect the time in which they find themselves. She said, I feel that's my duty and responsibility. Well, what about if we all took that mindset? So why can't we bring Fab Five Freddy, Chuck D, James Baum, Half Pint, Cam, Bumpy Knuckles, and then have a panel discussion or a conference with the young generation of artists, and travel the country and not look for Motorola, McDonald's, or Coca-Cola to sponsor it. We got enough Puff Daddies, Russell Simmons, etc. within this hip hop nation to finance that, unless we don't see a need for it. And that's kind of what I'm asking. Do you see a need for it?
I think it's obviously it's a great idea. I think that's something, there's a need. I think there's a desire. I think there's enough intelligent folks that want to hear this, as opposed to just hearing about the donkey of the day and those things. People want to have a little bit more meat on the bone, a little bit more substance. And I think that's always really good right now. I think people are looking for some clarity and want to hear these voices. And like I said, a mixture of, young and old and all kind of stuff. Mix it up and have people talk it out. I think it would be beneficial.
I agree. I think it's definitely needed to close the generation gap within hip hop, and to sit down the so-called young mumble rappers with the so-called grumpy old men of hip-hop, and like you said, let's have some deliberative dialogue, and let's really attack the real issues, because if we come together and unite, which is the great fear, that's the great fear. They see what's happening in Rio and Sao Paulo as you travel, Brazil. They see when James is in Argentina, in Chile, or when they're out in Iceland, Public Enemy's out in Iceland, or wherever they are. They they meet like-minded men and women, young and old. And the great fear is that revolutionary spirit is global. And if we unite, if we really establish a global hip-hop network with the express purpose of fighting the power. So it's the FTP. It's the fight the power.
Are you hip to Ambrosia for Heads? I'm sorry for cutting you off. No. Are you hip to that Ambrosia for Heads.com?
I can't say that I am.
Okay, this is a kind of a new thing this brother was putting together, and it's a site that's kind of it would pop up on my Facebook timeline a lot with a lot of stuff that I like. I think you would like. It targets like a more of a mature hip hop demographic. He now is trying to start. How do I term it? Like, I guess he's going to want some type of fee, a small fee, for like a streaming service of a lot of content aimed at a more of a mature. But it's interesting because I was seeing it pop up a lot, and I ran into the brother a few times. Real level-headed cat. It turned out that he worked in the legal office up at MTV back some years ago, with up in the upper corporate office. So he was a smart cat who is trying to figure out a way to build a platform that targets it. It's just something I wanted to throw out there because I hear what you're going, and I would think like, I'm not clear on what his plans are, but knowing that there's a growing audience that wants to be satisfied and wants to have content on a more of an intelligent, a more meat on the bone, substantive type of tip. It could be something interesting to keep your eye on. You know what I mean? But I'm definitely.
Yeah, I'll look into it and see what I can find. And share that with Half Pint and Brother James. But I just think it's something necessary that the time requires. And again, when you're in a race against time, and time isn't your friend, you don't have the luxury of wasting time. You know what I mean? So we got to seize the time and make the move. So on behalf of my sister Half Pint, the queen of hip hop for justice, and my big brother S1W James Bomb of the legendary Public Enemy, we got to thank Fab Five Freddy for hanging out with us. Half Pint, is there any final words you wanna give?
Other than we have our new assignment for today, which is the falsification of African consciousness by Amos Wilson. And again, Brother Freddy, I hope that we do connect, and I will reach out to Brother James to do that, so that you can.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Brother James will make the connect. And thanks for having me, man. And James, I'm glad you invited me on. This is a great lively convo. I appreciate your discourse, and
absolutely. It was an honor. It was an honor. I know Big James is there. Hold on 1 second. Let's unplug him. Brother James.
Yes, sir.
There you go. Any final words you want to share?
Well, I would like to thank you, first of all, for coming on, and hopefully we can invite more people to come to the platform, because we've had some interesting people come on, but we want to widen the platform, because the conversation that needs to be talked about is we can bridge these gaps with mumble rappers and who, because the genre is going different ways, and young people now, this is something we was going there, but I completely forgot about it. I didn't write it down. Is that they're using the technology. And a lot of the guys, before they were signed, they had 1 million followers already. And so when they had the 1 million followers, they got signed, and then now they're doing various things. But this would bring the old grumpy old men of hip hop to kind of like get rid of J. Cole or Kendrick Lamar, and then they can kind of like bring the Melly Mel's up to speed and various things like that. And that way they won't be upset with the young people, because they're only doing what they think, and they rich. These young dudes are rich.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's fascinating how the dynamics change in different aspects of the culture, but it still has to be. It's still one of the most amazing things that throughout all music streaming services on the planet, hip hop has been dominant. So Yeah, fascinating times, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. So again, on behalf of the Queen of Hip Hop for Justice, Half Pint, the legendary Son of Berserk featuring No Self Control, and S1W James Baum of the legendary Public Enemy, we salute and thank the legendary Fab Five Freddy for being with us tonight, and we hope to continue building and working with you so that we can actualize these conferences moving into 2019 and take a more on-hands approach and really take this show on the road, because not enough people are hearing this type of dialogue and not enough people are involved. So that just means we got a lot more work to do. So as Half Pint said, we got our homework assignment, we got our marching orders. Now it's left for us to move out and make it happen. So again, Fab Five Freddy, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We look forward to continuing to work with you. And everybody that called in and stayed on the line and listened live, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We look forward to being back with you next week, same time, different guest. Until next Sunday, peace and love, family.